We are recording. Glasses are on. Ladies are ready.
And
We're the
earrings.
glasses crew today. We've got a really special guest here with us. I don't even want to give her like the wrong um, introduction because I just know how impactful she's been on my life. I met this woman 10 years ago this year, believe it or not, which I cannot believe it's been 10 years. This fabulous lady who is the president and chief executive officer of the East Oakland Youth Development Center. She is the chair of the Oakland Police Commission, which holds the police department accountable for their behavior with the citizenry. I'm trying to think. She sits on a million boards. They always interview her for something. I mean, literally, her sizzle reel is probably 17 hours long because she does that much stuff. So we want to welcome Regina Jackson to History Unscripted, along with our esteemed panelists. We've got Ellen Fernandez-Sacco, the lady in purple today. True Lewis is there. And Regina, would you like to add anything to our story? Because I guess
No,
that's our story.
you have more than covered it. Thank you very much. I feel most welcome among all of these esteemed panelists. Thank you for having me.
How many people do you guys see daily at East Oakland Youth Development Center?
Daily, probably about 300. Annually, more than 1,200.
Wow. And here's the thing about what I love about EOYDC is I wish that I was 7 so that I could go back to EOYDC because I could learn cooking, I could learn African drumming, I could play on a sports team, whether it's basketball or a track team. I can learn coding because there's a computer lab. I'm probably leaving things out. Oh, there's art. There's a whole art department where kids learn how to paint and draw, do sculptures. All these cool trips that they get to take. Like some of the young people went to China. I went with them to China, right? They do a college tour every single year where they go to historically Black colleges and universities across the country. She leads the way. She's there. Please follow Regina Oak on all of your social media because you will get all the life that you need and you will live vicariously through her young people who you wish you were 7 again. Because you want to go to, because I want to go to EOYDC. I wish there was an EOYDC when I was a kid. But I grew up in Southern California and this was in Oakland. So yeah. So anywho, all right. Well, we're going to be talking about perception today, right? We talked about context in the last episode and how it's a battle for context. And right now, in addition to a battle for context, there's a battle of perception. What are you seeing, right? Are your eyes deceiving you? Are your ears deceiving you, right? And there are some people who are on the side of, well, no, they're not, but based on what I'm seeing, this is what it is, right? And we all have on glasses. It's no coincidence we're all wearing glasses on this episode because clearly we're seeing clearly, right? We've gone and sought out a means to get clearer vision. But if you choose to remain ignorant and you don't want clear vision, you're walking around needing a prescription and you don't. And the ways in which we manage to basically put that out there or let people know that that's a phenomenon is through history, right? And talking about what has happened and what we see. So the first article we're going to talk about, and it probably seems like it has no connection to genealogy and family history, but it totally does, is a New York Times piece that was amazing. It's called How 17 Outsized Portraits Rattled a Small Southern Town. And basically what happened was that a photographer was commissioned to go around and photograph people in a small town in Georgia called Noonan. And all she did was she captured folks, whatever they were wearing, and sometimes they dressed up, and they were just pleasant photos. And then she had them blown up into these enormous, not a tarp, but enormous banners, like really, really big, probably like maybe 6 feet by like 20 feet or something like that. And they just displayed these banners in just places all over town. And it was a mixture of folks. It wasn't just white people or Black people. There were people who maybe were Asian or Native American, people who practice Islam. There are people who are Christian. And the photos are just literally, there's no caption for them. There's no words. It's just the images of the people within the community. And what they saw as a result of just photos going up. Let's talk about that, because there were no, it wasn't like this campaign ad that I got from your boy, this little cute thing that he sent me trying to get me to vote for him, right? That it wasn't this. There are no words. Just imagine if this picture was all you saw. That's it. And the visceral reaction that the community had was a trip. Let's talk about that, you guys. What were some of the first impressions that you had when you saw this project? We'll have Regina go first.
I kind of feel like it's like Oakland, right? You have this sense that Oakland has so many Black people in it, and then you look at the data and it's like, oh my goodness, there are these growing pockets of people. So when I read about the Shahs and people being very uncomfortable that there are these sisters with their hijabs on, basically it was like this concept of, I didn't know these people were here, and who let them in, and where did my city go? Like Noonan is now the world, and I'm not sure that I gave permission for this. I don't know how I feel about it, and and that's a problem. And it's so interesting how we ourselves are so insulated. We're not really trying to get to know our neighbors. I blame technology for that, quite honestly, because we used to have to. Like when you were going out to play, kids showed up at your doorstep and said, come on out. Now you got to schedule play dates. So anyway, I say all that to say that it was an incredible campaign that opened up a lot of people's eyes. And quite frankly, I believe that there were a lot of folks that embraced it. But obviously there was some difficulty there. And not unlike Oakland, which is no longer Chocolate City, and continues to lose ground with African American folks. For myself, when our center was created, it was 99% Oaklanders in this area. It may be down to 30, but because we have the expertise now, we are unapologetically, disproportionately serving African Americans.
Wow.
And that's our commitment. I mean, we got great because all we served was Black. And that, quite frankly, is a very specialized service population that schools don't get, a whole bunch of people don't get. I'll stop there.
Look, we sounds like we need to have her on panel a lot more often, because she's echoing a lot of sentiments. But I think something that you're raising is very important. It's that what these portraits did is they showed people that their perception of where they lived was not what they thought it was.
Yep.
And with just an image, that's all they had to do, was just put an image up of different people that didn't fit the box or the description of whatever, right? It didn't even, and in some ways it's really interesting, because in the world of genealogy and family history, this happens a lot. You'll go to conferences, you'll go to different spaces, and we are always inserting ourselves into the conversation. We constantly have to, right? Like, this is a battle that everyone who's a person of color is having to fight in whatever space that they're in. And it's like, well, why should we talk about that? Because that's not my idea of what I think genealogy is, right? You're breaking what my narrative is about what this field is and what history is. Because of my perception that I've had in my mind, that I formulated based on my personal identity, because you go against that, now I'm uncomfortable because I'm being challenged. Even though we've always been here, we've always been a part of history, we've always had a narrative, right? It's the unearthing, and we talked about this a little bit during the last episode, that is the problem. Ellen, True, what would you guys like to say about this?
I think what's really shocking is that the artist didn't just show up, take pictures, and throw that up. I mean, she was there 2 years, over a 2-year period, going down and having conversations and determining that the neighborhood was ripe for a discussion on diversity and the changes that had happened. And then it just, when the images finally came up, then people just blew up. So it just really speaks to the kind of almost like bubbles of isolation that I agree with Regina. It is a lot with it has a lot to do with representation, and also the way that images circulate, or the way that things are used as a flag for entire communities. And then, you get something that kind of breaks that, and then people are like, wait a minute, their heads explode. They cannot handle that. Oh, these women in their hijabs, they've been living in our neighborhood for like 20 years. But now it's this big threat from like 9/11 or something. They draw on these other things. And I think that in a sense of popular culture is at fault too, because of the narratives that they circulate, especially things like detective shows and crime programs, and look at what side the power's on. So I think all of these things, people are consuming them, but then when you actually get on the street level, it really impacts people negatively in terms of how people interact and what they think and what the assumptions they make about what it means to be in community. What does that thing of community actually mean?
Yeah. What's the perception of community? That, like, you know what I mean? And your definition of what it is your perception, right? Based off what you see, what you consume, who you're around, right? And that is driving, right? Like, it's almost like everyone has been writing, at least in this community and other communities, you've been writing your own mission statement for where you live. And your mission statement may have different terms, and it may be some of the same things, but because you use the word unity in yours and I didn't use it in mine, I automatically just cast you out as though you don't belong here. True. What do you think about all of this?
I thought it was beautifully done, the way she, like Ellen said, she was there, she stayed in the community, and she brought this conversation up. But the military, when we're in a controlled environment, we're forced. We're able to put down our biases and live in this community, and that's kind of like what it's opening up there. We're just there to serve each other. We have each other's back. We know each other's foods, our languages, our religions, and we still manage to come together, on one mission. And and I like that. That's how I was kind of like viewing it, from the aspect of how we're in a controlled environment and how that opened us up. And then when I'm retired now and I go back into my own community after military life, we're able to adapt. We know how to, accept and say, okay, this is what it is. So,
Regina? May I add something, Nika?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. So, 50 years ago, when I moved into Oakland, our neighbors on the right were white, our neighbors on the black were Japanese, and we had keys to each other's houses, and it was just wide open, right? So what I'm finding that I saw in Noonan is that with gentrification, or what we should really just call displacement, there are people that are coming to the neighborhood and feeling proprietary over who can be where, and they're brand new. So, okay, so here's my deal. I had my son, Noah, was at the swimming pool 2 years ago, and a white lady who happened to be married to a Latino man approached him and said, "You shouldn't be here. You don't live here." And of course, Noah at the time was about 28. He knew he probably needed to be respectful, but he read her, wrote her, and erased her all in about 2 sentences by saying, first off, you don't know me. Second off, I've probably been here longer than you have, and how dare you? And that is the challenge that we are being faced with in Oakland every single day. People have been here 2 years, 3 months, what have you, and they do not understand the culture that they have bought into, meaning invested in, because they decided to be a part of our city. They are trying to reframe who we are, what we're about, and who is okay to be here.
But moving into the next story, my gosh, talking about people's perceptions. The story is covered by Vox News, and the title is "The Controversy Over the New Immigration Novel American Dirt Explained." And, it seems like Oprah and Gayle have been stepping their feet in it a lot over the last few weeks. because we had the whole thing with Kobe and Gigi and Lisa Les, that interview with I feel so bad for Gail because Gail is never not going to be, Oprah's best friend. Like she's never not going to be that, right? Like she doesn't have a choice, unfortunately. But the thing is, Oprah has her book club, right? We've known about this for years. That's something that's sort of like a holdover from her show. And one of the books that she introduced is one of her favorite books, right? Anyone that's mentioned even in proximity to Oprah, right? I could just be a sequin on her dress and that's going to net me something, whether it's accolades or, opportunities or whatever. So she puts out that she wants American Dirt is in her book club. And oh gosh, I'll read the beginning of the story. So the new novel, American Dirt by Jeanine Cummins, officially released on January 21st, was anointed the biggest book of the season well before it came out. It sold to Flatiron Books at auction for a reported 7-figure advance. Flatiron announced a first print run of 500,000 copies. For most authors, a print run of 20,000 is pretty good. It received glowing blurbs from luminaries like Stephen King, John Grisham, Sandra Cisneros. Early trade reviews were rapturous. The New York Times had a review twice, once in the paper, once in a weekly book review, in addition to interviewing the author and publishing an excerpt from the novel. But as the publication date approached, the narrative around American Dirt has changed. One of those New York Times reviews was a pan, and the other was mixed at best. Another critic revealed that she'd written a review panning the book too, and the magazine commissioned her review killed. Yikes. All these negative reviews centered on one major problem. American Dirt is a book about Mexican immigrants, and author Jeanine Cummins has identified as white, calling her family mostly white in every practical way a few years ago. She has since begun to discuss a Puerto Rican grandmother. Now, to me, in the genealogy world, this is when somebody all of a sudden decides to bring that card back out, and we're going to toss in the Native American ancestor, princess grandma, right? Like that's what we do. So Cummins had written a story that was not hers. And according to many readers of color, she did not do a very good job of it. In fact, she seemed to fetishize the pain of her characters at the expense of treating them as real human beings. So last week, when Oprah announced that American Dirt would be the next book discussed in her book club, the news was treated not as the crown jewel in the coronation of the novel of the season, but as a slightly awkward development for Oprah. Oprah ended up qualifying her choice, maintaining that she would keep the book in her club, but changed her planned coverage of it to a series of conversations with those on both sides of the issue. So, for Black Pro Gen Live, we've talked about people co-opting stories for the longest, right? In fact, True, me and you had a conversation last night with Carmen about, I think it was episode 98, where we talked about Orlando Williams and the story of his family, where his uncle was lynched, and how people who have discovered the story of his uncle have co-opted it and have profited off of that story and have sort of inserted themselves in a place where they were not, right? Like, or they should not have been. And so this seems like this is one of those scenarios. So I think my first question is, can people write from a perspective that they have never had?
So, can I?
Go ahead now.
Sorry, I feel some type of way about this, right?
Right.
Because people have been writing our story forever. And I'm actually currently also a Robert Wood Johnson interdisciplinary research fellow. And all of
that.
that.
She drop that on us. You see how
I did.
Because I was gonna say that earlier, but I didn't have all the language together.
There was too much, and I appreciate that. But in a nutshell, the concept is to pair community leaders with academics in research. Because typically researchers just kind of land in our communities and want to test something out. They never really connect with the community. Then they go out and they share their expertise. And it's like they rob us of our value and everything that we have in the name of trying to do something better for us. And that's not always even about us, right?
And robbing you of your agency to share and to do your own empirical research, which may not be scientific based on their standards, but it's still research.
How about that? The point is to increase the value of community voice, but also leverage the relationship or social capital on behalf of the academics in order to make sure that the work is done in a much more responsible way, cohesive way, and perhaps may live on after they leave, right? So we've been having this conversation about, who gets to speak for us? Who should be publishing these articles? Is it, and should the community leaders' names come first, even though they may not have a truck of, PhD and other kind of letters behind them? I think that one of the points that this article makes is if you do it well, if you write it well, if you are really trying to get a variety of people's thoughts and experiences, then maybe that makes it better. And truth be told, we as Black people we've had some literary geniuses, but we're not writing at the levels or the volumes as white folks. And we need our stories done well and out there. But my challenge is she didn't do it well. I really have big issue with just the title, Dirt.
Come on now.
And so it's set up, and clearly it was a machine done by the big money folks who were trying to push a narrative. And so the insensitivity, the lack of qualifying, Oprah should actually be ashamed of herself for quote unquote loving it so much and not having taken the time to really understand what does this mean to the little brown girls and boys that are coming up, right?
It's all about the money. I mean, like, come on now. I mean, like, people fought to have Chicano studies, and out of that field came out tremendous research, tremendous writers, people that wrote fiction. Not a one of those people are the people that get this kind of attention, So it's really, in some ways, reminds me of like what people used to complain about anthropology. Y'all come in here, you take our stories or whatever, you manufacture, you got your tenure. What do we get? Nothing. Maybe you'll get problems with the government because they'll use the information against you. But it's a really it's not a good look for 2020. I mean, it just seems like this kind of thing would have happened decades ago, not now. And the one that really killed me was the woman who was promoting it, and she hadn't even read it, which I thought, well, that's really not a good sign.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, we're seeing that even now. I mean, there was a story. Why does this? I keep going back to Bloomberg. There was a story that was just out yesterday about all these people that he's paying on social media, like who don't even agree with him, who don't want anything to do with his campaign, but he's paying them for social media, for them to post things about him that are organic, right?
$150 for Instagram.
Yeah, like, I mean, like they're being like, it's an actual job and they don't even agree with this guy. And so like,
the photo too with President Obama, that confused me, and I'm still confused about that. Like, did he give you permission? Like, did you just take that out of the air and just said okay? And it seems like after that commercial, it just kept going and going and going, where you have these hordes of people of color surrounding this guy, but nobody really knows. Are you seconding this? Are you
signing off on it?
Are you signing off on this? And that really hit me in a bad way when I first saw the commercial. And then after that, I turned off.
But there's a tokenism though. I mean, about this particular race, to me, it seems like it's been kicked up like an extra notch. I mean, going back to this stupid thing he sent me again.
I know.
Hold on, and I've probably folded it wrong, right? But the first person you see when you look at this is her. And then when you fold it out,
it gets progressively darker as you go in.
But you see how it was centered on the first person, how that always all this is going on that we know to be.
Notice,
right?
Yes. Notice that, okay? So I'm just gonna fold it. Even if I did this way, still, she's still on the front.
The bottom line, it comes out. Right.
They're always on the front,
right?
Did somebody join us?
That's right.
Come on, doctor.
But Dr. Shelley Murphy has joined the party. we just know that profit comes from you, right? And so what you're looking at is you're too stupid to tell your story, or maybe you don't have the resources to tell your story like this one person does. So we're going to put all of our money behind them because you don't have enough sense to tell your story or to know that it's profitable, right? Like that's kind of how this whole machine is. And I just, yeah, the level of tokenization that you're seeing with this particular book, right? It's making pawns of folks who are coming from an experience that is just not, it's not a, you know, it's not the Notebook. It's not sexy. It's not, you know what I mean? And it's monetizing it in a way where you're basically monetizing trauma and their experience.
Right.
And to me, it's no different than when you go to a plantation and they are telling you about all the woodwork and all the marble and where it came from, but they don't tell you about the people who were shining that stuff or who actually built it or who installed it or who maintained it, right? You're going to profit from the appearance of it, but you're not going to talk about it in context or any of those things.
And I thought the example of that was the centerpieces and just the title. That ties all into what you're talking about in the lived experience, you know, taking ours and co-opting off of it. And it's just like the little girl. I keep harking back about her getting on Ellen and how those other young ladies ran with her dance move and how it just went right. And somebody knew, they all knew it. And if even as a child, I would be like, you know, something just wouldn't have sat in my soul right about that. And for her now to get the recognition, you know, all that, all areas, all genres, it's all tied into what we're talking
and
about
what
right
you're talking about is you're talking about Jalea.
here. Jalea.
Right.
Love with Miss Jalea. She is
Mhm.
amazing. She created this dance and on her own. In fact, if you look at the photos in her room when she's like, you know, doing the dance, you see these gorgeous photos of her, like literally like Alvin Ailey quality photos on her wall in her room of her dancing. And she created this dance and did not put it on TikTok, which of course is apparently the home for new dances now. And these white children co-opted her dance and became famous off of it to the point where the NBA, the National Basketball Association NBA, brought these young women in during All-Star Weekend and had them allegedly teaching dancers from the NBA teams her Jalea's dance. And what happened was, let me tell you,
Her
what
digital
happened was,
footprint.
no, let me tell you what happened. It was a reporter from the New York Times who caught wind of it because of Black Twitter. It
Right.
exists, okay? It is an advocacy arm. I'm telling y'all, Black Twitter is real if you have not partaken. But Black Twitter is what really made it happen. So a reporter, I don't want to say her name wrong, I think it was Taylor Lorenz from the New York Times. She found Jalea, did an entire story on her in the New York Times. The NBA was like, oh no, we will not get dragged by Black Twitter. Flew the baby in to All-Star Weekend in Chicago. And before the weekend was over, them little white girls, I ain't saying that, the little white girls was gone. Jalea was half court performing with the dancers. I was like, get it, Black Twitter, okay? Like we do not play. So, but the thing is, we've never had the ability to mobilize. Think about how important this is. Behind issues, it's just all these things, but it's the advocacy part. And
Yes.
so you're going back to Jalea's story is important though, because that literally is, you know, it's
Modern day.
Elvis to Big Mama Thornton. It's the, you know, the Little Richard to, you know, whoever they say started rock and roll. It's all of those things. It's you know, it's the
Let's
red and the
set the
blue and the
record
flag.
straight here.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the red and the blue and the flag, you guys. If you look at color
Mhm.
theory, red is warm, blue is cold. Our country operates in polar opposites because that's the foundation of it.
Yeah.
You don't codify slavery in a constitution and then tell people they're free, right? Our country
Right.
was literally set up on contradiction.
The invisibility, you know, that
Mhm.
keeps getting invoked, and it's sort of like, I mean, people have been brought into the United States since the 30s or before to work the fields. I mean, this is not new. But this is like, I guess it's the trauma of the week. It's kind of what it becomes, like this focus, this relentless focus on pain, and the pain sells now.
Well, and that's a great point. But I would like to understand Oprah's magic wand. How, and maybe it's her money that made her insensitive to, the way this was panned out. I mean, maybe she doesn't have like a standard operating procedure for reviewing and selecting books, but she probably should. It should be vetted by a multitude of people. I mean, the Dove commercial made it to TV, but nobody actually thought that might be a problem. That was a lack of doing your research, your homework.
And then there's also something that goes along with that too, because in the diversity and inclusion space, people think if you've got one Black person at the table, they can speak for all Black folks and they can co-sign for all Black people, right?
Oh my goodness.
In our daily lives.
Right.
We're
like
always keeping that in check, but it's like you said, when it gets to other levels, like who's going to be the person to put that in check? Who's in that room? Who else is in this room here?
Auntie Shelley.
Or who don't we have in this room,
Well, if we don't tell the story, it's going to come from somebody else with their perspective, which ain't always the same one that we have culturally. And I think we need to step it up. It just has to happen. More needs to be done. And it's not just us, but I'm saying, our people.
Yeah.
Because if we don't put it out there, we don't control. What's that African proverb about something about the lion? And if you don't talk about it, the lion's going to tell it or something their way. That's it.
The hunter does not tell the lion's story.
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
And last but not least, we've got this story. It was a lengthy one, but I think with Regina being here, we definitely need to hit on this one. My goodness. It's talking about a fire. It was in The Intercept. And it's talking about a fire that took place in Tennessee. Of course, this is where I live. And the story is called The Fire This Time. In the face of rising white supremacist violence, police continue to investigate victims and activists. Yes, that sounds crazy, but it's true. Tennessee. It's been 10 months since someone set an office building on fire at Highlander Research and Education Center, a storied civil rights institution perched in the mountains of northeastern Tennessee. But the investigation into the fire seems to have gone nowhere. The charred remains of the collapsed structure are still untouched, and the yellow tape blocking access to them has only recently come off. In the parking lot next to the destroyed building, a symbol someone spray painted in black on the concrete the night of the fire is also untouched. It looks like a hashtag, but with 3 intersecting lines instead of 2. That symbol is one used by racist extremists in the US and abroad. It was painted on one of the firearms used by an Australian white supremacist who massacred 51 people at 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, just 2 weeks before the fire at Highlander. The story goes on to talk about the fire and how, as a result of this fire, now the folks that are associated with the civil rights organization are facing scrutiny and unfair monitoring by law enforcement, even though they are the victims in this case. We've seen this a lot.
Yes.
Where do we start with this one?
The most interesting thing is that we see the movie over and over and over. And it's because somebody else tells the story. The police, they show up the way they show up, which is to presume that if you have a fire, you must have set it for the insurance or for whatever. And it's really what I am working on in Oakland, is making sure that we have emotionally intelligent policing, because that self-awareness piece is so incredibly important. And this compassion and empathy has got to be in place. You cannot have it all figured out before you even get to the interview. But so long as we have people at the top who don't look like us, their implicit and often explicit bias just oozes all out.
And the Highlander Center did such important work. And it just boggles my mind. Why would anybody not support the investigation? But they were just trying to stop them, and they refused to be stopped. I mean, that was a great ending to the article, where it's like the day after the buildings burned down, and they have a workshop to do. And they just take it someplace else. They'll do it at a library. Then that isn't enough to stop what people are doing. You know, that isn't going to stop their mission.
It's like when my kids were in school, right? They were only like 5 of the minorities in this school district. And I think one time the football field, what is the banner there where the scoreboard?
Yeah.
Somehow or another, a bunch of kids had broke that, and they automatically just assumed it was my son and the other child that was Latino and maybe some of the other bad kids in the school. And I was like, hold up, wait a minute. You know, I had to go down there and set the record straight. And come to find out, it was not even my kids.
The ways in which we continue to be dismissed. You know, I was just on a round table around Black maternal health and the fact that, you know, Black women are not getting service. They're not being believed when they talk about pain, you know, all these kinds of things. I mean, all this does is continue the PTSD and traumatic, you know, environment. And we're just beat down and beat down and beat down. And they hope that we'll just go somewhere and die. And
Yes.
it's like, and still we rise, but at what cost?
We have an opportunity to contribute. So I think that's a good thing. So
We'll continue the fight. Ain't
Yeah.
no question, no doubt about it.
Oh yeah, I'm Calvin Murphy's daughter. My ass is supposed to fight. If not, I should be ashamed. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm Ruben Ray's granddaughter.
There you go.
And we just
That
gotta
Granddaddy Ike's daughter down
That's
there.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is that when you learn and you get agency based off of what you know about your ancestors and not the narrative that has been fed to you by other people,
Right.
that's how you can walk around capable of being confident in whatever you're doing when it comes to whatever
Right.
industry you're in. That you're standing on their shoulders, right?
Mhm.
Well, and that's the challenge for all the kids
Exactly.
in foster care and all of the like broken homes where they can't track back to a grandparent.
Mhm.
We have to, or I appreciate that what you're doing is helping to leave breadcrumbs toward the trail that empowers them to recognize they came from somebody, even if they can't call their name.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's what we'll end with.
Hey.
Try and find
Thank
those
you.
Thank you.
Love you, ladies.
Mwah.
Don't just